You could drink a glass of pumpkin juice or a pint of Hogshead brew. You could even drink some polyjuice if you're tired of looking like you. You could drink fire whiskey by the dram or by the quart in Hagrid's case. But there's one sure drink that I like best to shove into my face. Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butterbeer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Irvin Cateman.
I'm Sam Williams.
I'm Aurelia Lieb.
And I'm Sophia Jenkins. Hello, and welcome to the Three Broomsticks. This is a brand new Harry Potter podcast. We're all huge Harry Potter fans, and we hope you'll enjoy listening to us chat about our beloved book series.
Some of you may know us from the Alohomora podcast, where the three of us have been hosts for a couple of years. Thanks so much for joining us at our new podcast.
Some of you might be listening from the beginning and discovering us 10 years in the future, in which case, we applaud your dedication. I trust your commutes on hoverboards and flying cars and 2030s are still long enough to listen to some podcasts.
And a very special welcome to anyone joining us who hasn't heard our dulcet tones before. We'll just quickly introduce ourselves the way we would any guest who's new to our listeners. As Albus Dumbledore said, I hope our old friends will forgive us and allow their attention to wander freely. So, I'm Irvin Cateman. I am a Ravenpuff. Hi.
Hi.
My favorite book is definitely Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. You are going to hear me wax rhapsodic about it time and time again because it's just so well written. And I've been in the Potter fandom for well ever. I was dragged to see the first movie when I was 9 years old, back in 2001. Read the first 4 books, discovered MuggleNet back in 2003, and sort of never looked back. I've been a columnist at MuggleNet and writing Harry Potter essays for well over a decade now, and I have published a book about Albus Dumbledore called Dumbledore, The Life and Lies, which I will probably be begging you listeners to read and buy almost every episode. So yeah, psyched to be here.
Hi, I'm Aureo. I'm a Gryffindor.
Grr.
I know, boo boo. I'm the one non-American, as you can probably hear. I'm from Germany, but I do live in the UK, and I still have a horrible German accent, so apologies.
A delightful German accent. You misspoke on delightful.
Oh, okay. What's that word again? My favorite book is Order of the Phoenix, although I do have to say Half-Blood Prince is a very close second. And I think it's partly because when I first read it, I was like 13, I'm thinking. So it was just the right book to read at the time to learn more about, politics in general, and maybe don't trust everything that's printed in the news. So it was just because of that, that's still very dear to my heart. My journey to Potter is a bit confusing. A friend of my dad's gave me not even the whole audiobook, but part of the audiobook for Prisoner of Azkaban when I was like 8.
Wait, which part?
Like the first, it was cassettes, because clearly we are old. So it was the first 4 cassettes out of, I believe it was like 10-ish. So like the first third of the book, I'm guessing.
So it's like, Sirius Black broke into Gryffindor Tower. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And I was like, wait. Like, first of all, I was like, oh, it sounds like there was something before this. And I was like, it stops. Like, what, the book's not over. And then turned out that my dad actually owned the first book because someone gave him the book because, it was the whole adults should read more fantasy type thing, and he didn't like it at all, and he finally worked out that he had the first book to like the half of the third book that I had. So he's like, oh, maybe you should read this, and that's then how I properly started my journey through Potter. So yeah, I've been working for MuggleNet in my 20s, which I can now say that I'm no longer in my 20s, and I've been podcasting for a while, so glad to do it again.
I'm Sophia. I'm a Hufflepuff.
Hi.
I tend to like the even numbers of the books the best, and I sort of move between them. At the moment, it's Half-Blood Prince. That's sort of my comfort book. If I'm having a hard time, I go and read Half-Blood Prince. I first got introduced to Harry Potter through my sister. I know a lot of her friends were reading it. I think I'd already seen the first movie, and I started reading it when I was 7. And then I just never stopped. And I've been working at MuggleNet for the last 5 years, both writing and editing Irvin's column. And this is my first time doing a podcast, so I'm excited about it.
Yay! We're off to a great start.
I'm Sam. I am a Gryffindor if you have to choose one.
Grr.
And a Gryffindor if you can choose 2. So... yay for me. My fave book. Now, I have 2 different lists. I have, like, the ones that I think are objectively the best written, and then my personal favorites. Prisoner of Azkaban is what I think is objectively the best, although I know there's disagreements on that pod, which is good for the pod, bad for me. And my personal favorite would be Order of the Phoenix, just like Aurelia. So... that's cool and fun, and I'm excited that there's another Gryffindor Order of the Phoenix fan on here, and I won't have to defend myself so harsh.
Wait, so we basically have a, like, full-on 50-50 split between Gryffindors who like Order of the Phoenix and Hufflepuffs who like Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah, pretty much.
What does that tell us?
Oh, this is gonna get fun.
My journey to Potter, I think, predates all of y'all's, because it was 1998 that I ran into it. I was 6 years old. And my sister brought it home from school, and we had just moved from DC to New Hampshire. So it was October 1st or 2nd is when my mom started reading me the book. And so these like late, it gets really dark really quick in October in New Hampshire. So these sort of Halloween, cold, dark nights in New England was sort of where I started reading Harry Potter. And sometimes I remember the night that I really got into it, because I kept falling asleep in the first 7 chapters. But then once we get past the sorting, I was awake, wide awake. And there were nights where the power would go out because the infrastructure in New Hampshire is very above ground, and so wind knocks all power lines down. And so I remember very specifically reading the Halloween chapter in late October by candlelight because the power had gone down. And so I couldn't read at all very well. I was in special reading classes for a long time. And the introduction of Harry Potter into my household, that was the one book that I wanted to read by myself. So I would sit for years slowly reading each chapter, trying to figure out what these words meant and match them to what I knew they sounded like. So I'd like put on Jim Dale at night, because I've been an insomniac since I was like 3 or 4, and just listen to his voice and read the book, and that's how I'd fall asleep for still to today. That is how I fall asleep. And that was my journey to Potter.
That is so sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks. Today, you just heard her voice. We have a rockin' guest. She is the opposite of sweet. She's vile. I'm kidding.
Thank you.
But today's guest will rock your world, suck out your brains, chew on them, spit them out, back into your head, shake you all about. She's the most Tom Riddleist, Voldy-kissingest, Death Eater loyalist, diary readingest witch we know, Grace Candido Beecher!
I just picture myself running into like the wrestling ring right now.
With your Death Eater tank on and your Slytherin gloves out.
In my pajamas, because I am wearing my pajamas right now.
Grace, hello.
Hi. I honestly was smiling through this whole thing. You guys are so adorable. It is great to be here. As that lovely intro told you all, I am the most Tom Riddleist, Voldy kissingest, Death Eater loyalist. Diary reading. So if you've got a diary, know that I'm in the other room reading it. I'm over there right now. And with the Voldy kissing, we both suffered through that. Like, Voldy didn't like it, I didn't like it, but we did it for the pod. So if you're not willing to do that, then I don't even know what to tell you. Anyway. I'm Grace Candido Beecher. Thank you for the intro, Sam. My Hogwarts house is Slytherin. My favorite book is Chamber of Secrets. I really do think it's like the most fun little mystery, and I love rereading it. It's like one of those easiest ones to digest and go through so quick. And my journey to Potter, kind of similar to a lot of people's. I feel like I found a lot of comfort in it when I was a kid. I found it when I was like 9 or 10, because I remember thinking like, when I turn 11, I'm going to be just like Harry. But yeah, I mean, it's been quite the journey, and I've been going to a few. I've only gone to like the academic festivals for Harry Potter, but I have read a ton of books, including Irvin's. I would highly recommend his, and also Laurie's about Snape. And I was one of the writers for the companion, the companion that's coming out in April, the companion book, Volume 2. The Alohomora companion. Oh my God, you would think I would know the name by now. I just call it the companion Volume 2. But Alohomora is coming out with companion novels for each of the books. So I was part of the Volume 2 one.
Grace, if it makes you feel better, I barely know the title of my book. Because my publisher wanted like a fancy new title with a lot of keywords in it. So my book is now, hold on, Dumbledore, The Life and Lies of Hogwarts' Most Renowned Headmaster in Unofficial Exploration. That's the one.
I can confirm I was in a bookshop with Irvin, and he was like, oh, can you ask if they have my book? And I was like, what's the title again? And he just looked at me. I was like, I'll just ask for your name then.
Oh, Lord. But yeah, I'm currently cooking on some ideas right now for book writing, but nothing official yet. Just watch this space. Something will happen.
Yeah, pretty much. I met Grace at one of those academic conferences, Chestnut Hill, I want to say 2018.
I think it was 2018, yeah.
Yeah. And so immediately decided that we're going to be best friends, and so we are. And pretty much ever since that day, I've been trying to convince her that the world needs more books from her.
Yep. Thank you very much.
This is very true.
Honestly, I've told you this before, so this isn't just like me on the podcast saying shit, but you're an inspiration in a lot of ways. Both you and Laurie were kind of like inspiring to me to be like, oh, I need to jump into this a little bit.
Aww. Y'all see why I invited Grace onto the podcast. Thanks very much, Grace. This episode, the 5 of us have gathered for the very first time to discuss our favorite characters in the series, because I feel like people's choice of favorite characters tells you so much about them, right? Like,
perhaps too much sometimes.
I mean, also true. And because Harry Potter has, like, so many characters, there's, like, a million to choose from. So it's not sort of, the multiple choice of, like, 3 protagonists. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think we should just dive right on in.
Yeah, if I'm being real, I very rarely hear about people choosing the main 3 as favorites. Though we do have one who has.
It's just so obvious and disappointing, and those people are boring. Go ahead, Aureo.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I have to say, I'm not sure if it's partly because I was very young when I started reading them, but I didn't realize that people picked other characters until I talked to them about it. I was like, wait, you don't like Harry Potter the most? I was like, okay, weird. But then I think almost when you don't pick the main character that you know the best, I'm like too overwhelmed because there's too many characters. And I'm just like, I'll just stick with Harry, so I'm good. And I always really like sort of mentorship relationship type of stuff in any form of media. And I know we don't get crazy much with Harry and Albus, but like I do like the bits that we do get. So it's either Harry or Albus that I put down, but I was aware I'm recording with Irvin, so I was like, I don't want to,
don't step on toes.
Pick Albus. Yeah, I was like,
you're welcome to. I don't claim a monopoly on him.
I was like, what? Irvin wrote a book about him. I didn't, so I guess it's his to take. So no, but in all seriousness, it's sort of always been Harry. And I think it's mostly because we know the most about him. We get to experience everything from his worldview. So I just kind of relate to him the most because I see his perspective spelled out for me. And I came up with a little bit of things me and Harry have in common. Don't take it too seriously, because it's not too seriously to be taken, because I'm not the chosen one. No one's made a prophecy about me.
I was gonna say, like, where are the prophecies about you? Like, I have not been informed.
Yeah. Well, you're in America and I'm in Britain, so...
Oh, so you think the whole of prophecy is, like, localized by country?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah,
for
definitely.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't get the nice things, Irvin. We don't get those. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Fine.
We got to be in the cool places to do that.
I mean, I'm also from Germany, so it would probably be somewhere in Germany. Who knows where that is? But yeah. But similarly to Harry, I have a really big scar on my back since the age of almost 1. So I always sort of relate a little bit to him. Granted, I can cover that scar a lot of the time by wearing clothes. But like, you know, throughout school, when, you know, you have to change for PE, everyone was always staring at me, and it'd always be the type of people who were otherwise never ever caught talking to me, who would be like, "Oh my God, what happened to you?"
Oh my
and
God,
you'd be like,
"That's so weird.
Yeah.
Why would they do that?"
You're clearly just interesting now because there's something sort of shocking to see. And I was like, really? And like sometimes they would, like, it'd be 3 weeks later, the same person would be like, "What happened to you?" I was like, "So you didn't even pay attention the last time you asked me about this?" So very sort of, you know, easier to cope with than Harry, because it wasn't on, you know, my face. But yeah, I've always sort of related to him when people stared at him. And then sort of other things I have maybe slightly in common with him. I was really, really, really good at football, to the point, like, I should say football as in football the rest of the world calls football, so like soccer. Because no one plays that weird version of football where you play with your hands in the rest of the world. So I was really good, as in I could have probably played professionally. So
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
I'm old now and I can't anymore, but you know.
You don't want your body to take that damage either, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you ever, like, consider, like, becoming a professional football player?
Not really, partly because women's sports are not really paid well. And, you know, it's more sort of a hobby that you get a little bit of money for.
God,
almost.
that sucks.
And I also have to say, women's football has gotten so much better in the past 10 years that, you know, if I was 10 years younger now, no one would care. Like, I was good. I was really good at the time of when I was the right age, essentially. Like, I could have made it 10 years ago, maybe. I definitely couldn't now. So I was like, it's developed too much and I'm not any good anymore. But yeah, that was always one of the ones where I was like, oh yeah, I can sort of see it with like his Quidditch prowess and everything. But I can also see why he chose not to become a professional Quidditch player. So, and last one I put down as things I have in common with Harry is like Ron and Hermione's bickering throughout all of the books. So annoying. It's like, I'm always like, can you just please stop?
It never gets better either. It's never more understandable when you go back as like a 30-year-old, like, let me reread this. No, it's still bad. It's still very annoying.
Yeah.
Really? Like, I never minded their bickering. I was just always like, yeah, I mean, so they bicker. That's how they express sexual tension. Like,
yeah, I thought it was kind of cute.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we have a whole array of opinions over here.
Yeah.
Marriage counseling, marriage counseling, marriage counseling.
I mean, part of it is, I think, just one side of my family is very much the, like, bickering, shouting, sort of like, the minute anything goes wrong, suddenly we're, like, screaming at each other, and that's just how we, like, process emotions, which, I mean, okay, may not be the healthiest way, but I'm also just like, yeah, people bicker when they love each other. That's a thing.
And I also think it's
God, I'd shut down. Since
they're, like, teenagers, I'm like, oh, yeah, they don't know how to communicate very well yet. But as they get older, yeah, I think they should maybe find some other ways to communicate as well.
Yeah. I think it's partially because I'm so not interested in any of the romantic storylines in these books. So I'm just like, can we just move on to the part where we kill Voldemort, please? So yeah.
You and Voldemort are also both thinking that at the same time. He's pushing Bellatrix out of his bedroom. Like, stop! I just this is the part where you kill me.
I mean, I am asexual, so that probably plays part of it. But yeah, so those are sort of the more funny reasons. But then I do really like that Harry has a strong sense of justice, and that he always stands up for what is right and is not even seriously debating of I could take the easy way. He just like, no, it's like I'm gonna stand up and shout at Umbridge. I know this is not going to end well for me, but I'm still going to do it. Partially maybe also 15 years old and not, reflecting much on choices in general. But, it's also the part where I'm like, bravery to the point of stupidity sometimes. But, he just knows what is the right thing for him to do and he just does it. And yes, he has a hero complex, but I do tend to have also a hero complex to, a much smaller degree. I'm not jumping in front of cars or something. But you get what I mean. And I do think he is actually a good leader, as we see him leading the DA, as we see him leading the resistance. He's not perfect, clearly, because he's a teenager and he still has to learn, but it does come naturally to him. And people are drawn to him. Again, granted, he has a scar on his face and he survived, being killed as a kid. So that is partly why people are drawn to him. But he also is actually quite good at leading them without, being super arrogant. Maybe it helped that the Dursleys were shit to him for 10 years, but,
Yeah, keep him humble. That was the real design.
I'm so happy that you brought up Harry because, he's my second favorite, actually. I love Harry. I think Harry's great. I always feel a little sad when people say they hate Harry, just because I'm like, but he's trying, though. You see him struggle. He really does go through an arc. Like, people say that Harry, doesn't have character development, just kind of kills me a little bit, because you see it clearly.
Yeah.
It's also hard to understand why anyone would be a big fan of the series when they hate the character that you follow around the most.
Right? That's an awful lot of time to spend with someone you hate.
You're in his noggin the whole time.
I never quite understood that either. Are we all agreed that Harry is at least, kind of great, even if not our favorite?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly not, super... Okay. I won't say he's, super magically skilled, because he doesn't really academically push himself. But you know what? He's got some good instincts. I don't want to attribute all of those to Tom, but... he must have some on his own for sure.
And also, it's not all of his worth comes from his skills. It comes from like what Aureo was saying is from his sense of justice. So yeah, he's not that magically skilled, but that doesn't bother me. It kind of is nice to have a hero who isn't just perfect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point out that I think it's hilarious that Grace's favorite characters are Tom and then the character who has a bit of Tom in him.
Yeah, Grace
well
just
chosen.
ranks characters by how much Tom they have.
It's percentage-wise. Yeah, after that, it's all the Horcruxes and then everyone else.
Yeah.
No wonder why as soon as Harry wakes up from the graveyard, Grace is like, why don't I like Harry as much? What's happening? Narcissa just saved him and suddenly he's terrible.
Suddenly he's so boring. Oh my god.
Just closes the book. I can't even finish this.
I just can't even with this boy.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy Harry because I love his the friendships that he makes. His human connections are really what makes kind of almost define him as a character and also carry him through the series.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's one of my favorite things about Harry and about the series as a whole is the emphasis on friendship. Mm-hmm. Because Harry doesn't really have a great family to work with. For him, his friends become his family, and I am all for found family. Yeah, that is my jam. So
I feel that's one thing that all of the Harry Potter fans can agree on is found family. That's the good stuff.
Yeah.
I think anyone in any sort of fandom space seems to be about found family. If you care about any fandom to go online and talk about it, you're usually into found family.
Except for Game of Thrones, they're always about found in family.
Hey, but and that's why this isn't a Game of Thrones podcast.
No. I want to go back to something I think Sophia said about how, like, Harry's not perfect and that's okay. Like, I often encounter the other argument that he's, like, almost a little too perfect. And I don't agree with that at all. I actually think Harry, like, is a pitch perfect balance of the, like, he's not perfect. Like, he has his moments, but he's also, like, a really good guy. Like, he's a protagonist you can aspire to. Like, I don't relate to Harry that much. I am not a Gryffindor. Like, yeah, it's not really my style. But, like, reading about like a teenager who's like totally willing to lay down his life for his friends and honestly for complete strangers. Like, Grace, what was it you said a while back? Like, oh, you know, I'm Harry Potter and it's sacrifice a clock.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. I think also too, I mean, part of it is you cannot have, unless you're going to do a very hard fantasy sort of novel, you can't have Harry be so magically gifted. Like, if he could just do the things Hermione did all the time, there would be no need for side characters. Like, if he's just Albus Dumbledoring it out there, it suddenly becomes a very different story.
Yeah.
Then we come to end of book 1 and Albus is like, well, you're ready, I'm telling you about Horcruxes, and by end of book 2 this story is done.
Well, it was funny, like, Harry got his little, like, let's get Harry some one-on-one magic boot camp, and it's from Hermione in Goblet of Fire. And that's really the only sort of serious training he does for spells and magic.
Well, no, because there's Patronus lessons with Lupin, and then there's, like, Tom Riddle 101 lessons with Dumbledore.
Yeah, but that's not... That,
Snape
so the Tom Riddle 101 is not...
spell.
Is not spells, but like the Patronus, yes, I get.
Yeah, and he gets one dueling club lesson, don't forget that, and he uses that for the rest of his time.
As a teacher, I'm going to say that wasn't a lesson as just as it was an exhibition for Snape's guile.
I do see the point where people can say he's too good, but I think, and I mean, it's sort of a stupid thing to say, but he's the perfect character for this story, which, you know, makes sense. He's the main character of the story. So, but like, if you had that scenario, as in, you know, let's all pretend we're Dumbledore and we're like, oh, I need the perfect little, like, you know, orphan boy to stand up against Voldemort, and it can only go down like this. He is almost perfectly, you know, in a lab designed to be that person. Like, he couldn't be better for that role.
I sometimes wonder if, like, it would be a real interesting change to the story if, like, Harry were actually not very good at magic. Like, Harry, like, couldn't cast all the spells that he can now. Like, he has a lot of trouble. I'm kind of thinking of, oh, God, what was it? What was that one? Carry On by, was it Rainbow Rowell, I believe, was the writer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Because the main character in that story has very powerful magic that he cannot control, so he can't really cast spells all that well. So it's almost like things just going off, like magic just not being able to be controlled. Like, what if Harry, like, couldn't control his magic, and or he just had trouble with magic all the time? Like, that would make things so interesting because the opposing side has complete control over magic all the... I don't know. I love, like, thinking of these different dichotomies. Like, what if Harry, like, didn't have magic, basically? Like, very little magic control.
But I also love that, like, he's a chosen one, but, like, the prophecy chosen one isn't, like, the most powerful wizard of all time who's destined to, like, be a match for Voldemort. It's like, no, he's just a chosen one because, like, love.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, yeah, Harry's great.
Harry's
great.
fabulous, but there's also a mentor figure that I believe connects directly to our boy Harry, who is someone else's favorite.
You've opened up so many possibilities. Like, I could make an argument that Alastor Moody's eye is the mentor.
And one that dies falling through a veil.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
now we
fine.
know who it is.
Right, before you said veil, that still hadn't narrowed it down.
Yeah. So my favorite character of the book is Sirius Black, which I know has rankled some feathers here and there. a lot of this just has to come down to like archetype characters that are parental, but also see potential and also allow for fun and ease up on expectations just a bit. And so Sirius falls into that archetype, like Professor Aizawa from My Hero Academia is in that. And like there's also this certain archetype of like long-haired, raggedy, tragic men that I also very much enjoy. So Tristan from the King Arthur series, and just like, yeah, the list goes on and on and on. But Sirius was the harbinger of this iconic character falling in love withness that I have. And it's also funny because like I spent weeks trying to figure out who's my favorite character, and I always say Sirius, but it's really hard for me to pick just anybody because like Fred and George are really up there, Ginny's up there, Remus Lupin, the first 3 books Hagrid, like, so before he goes all Scroot Blasty Andy.
You have raised the hackles of everyone on this panel in the last 10 seconds.
Albus Dumbledore I love, Harry I love. I think that the ingenuity behind Horace Slughorn's character is really fun. Like there's so many. And yet each read through changes a bit of who I love and like. So like Hermione was one of my all-time favorite characters for a long time. And then I reread the series in college, like the 20th read through, and suddenly was like, oh my gosh, she's so annoying. So, and it changes. Like I've gone back to being like, nah, she's not that annoying. But the one character who stays firmly cemented is like, oh, I love this character and I love what they're accomplishing in the book. That's always been Sirius. And so I think that's what I want to stick with. Although book 5 and book 6 Harry are some of my favorite. It's really hard to choose.
And he gets so much development in that too.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I go with Sirius is he's the character that emotionally affects me the most. I don't think many people in the fandom really deeply think about how tragic his story is. So, when we learn that Harry's parents are only 21 in the 7th book, which I remember being very shocked by. Like, I thought that they were way older. And that means that Sirius is 21, And so he spends the prime of his life, age 21 to 33, in a soul-sucking prison for a crime that he didn't commit. Not only that, but he's there because he and his best friend James made a mistake off their own bias, and so I'm sure that they had grown up thinking like, oh, we don't have any werewolf bias, Remus is fine. But like that had to have factored into their decision in thinking that Remus was the turncoat and not Peter Pettigrew. And so they make they make this huge character mistake, right? They don't see with true eyes what's going on, and he gives up the Secret Keeper to what he thinks is his other best friend, which only leads to an attempt on his godson's life and his best friend's wife's death. So, and in trying to enact revenge, he fails. This guy goes free. Sirius doesn't get a trial, goes to prison for 12 years, and is just barely able to keep himself sane. And then when he finally gets out and he's about to kill Peter Pettigrew, his godson humbles him into not doing it. And that decision to not kill Peter allows Voldemort to come back, and Voldemort orchestrates Bellatrix Lestrange's release from prison or escape from prison, which then leads directly to his death. And so, he gets 12 years in prison and then 2 years of freedom. And in those 2 years of freedom, he's like shuffling around Scotland in the middle of winter, maybe escapes to a tropical place for a little bit, then comes back, watches Voldemort come back to power, has to spend almost a year in his old mum's place that he hates, stuck there because Dumbledore won't let him leave. And then he's so rusty and filled with this PTSD that he goes out and gets killed the moment his godson really needs his help. So there's this tragic backstory, but it's also the most memorable moment for me from reading the series the first time was, I don't know, I must have been 7 or 8 when I read book 3. And just this utter moment of triumph and excitement when Harry is like, oh my gosh, I don't have to go back and live with the Dursleys. I can go and live with my godfather. This is going to be amazing. That moment then filled with the rush towards desolation when Sirius, gets captured by the Dementors and suddenly Peter Pettigrew's escape and the third book sort of falls to pieces before, their wonderful rescue mission. That moment of utter excitement to desolation is, to me, the most memorable part and my favorite part from reading the series. And Sirius is key centered there. And Sirius provides Harry an outlet of hope, right? Hope that he might have a normal life, hope that things could be nice for 1 second, that he could have fun, that someone, an adult around him, loves him, and not just because he's the chosen one, or because he's good at Quidditch, or because he's in Gryffindor, or because he's famous. He's got an adult in his life that loves him for just being him and wants him to be him, and that's Sirius. Sirius as an adult that doesn't expect something from him. He's got flaws, of course, right? He's got to work through his PTSD. He probably needs some sort of therapy. He has a thrill of risky behavior as a coping mechanism, and also probably an ambition to make up for lost time. And he doesn't have the right idea all the time, but he loves Harry, and that's enough for me. Also, he's cool as
What a beautiful way of putting all that.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew of the tragedy of Sirius, but to put it all together like that is extremely tragic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the fandom has kind of, gotten whiplash from, loving Sirius as this, iconic, tragic rebel to, hating him as a bully, and I just sort of can't keep up with, do we love Sirius or do we hate him right now as a fandom? But I've always just I've really liked Sirius, more as a character than as a person. I think if I met Sirius in real life, I don't think we'd be friends. But I love his arc in the series. Everything Sam said, I love how incredibly flawed he is, and I love how we see him at his best in Goblet of Fire when he's a good godfather to Harry, and then we see him at his worst in Order of the Phoenix, and his worst is really shitty, and the tragedy of it all, it's so compelling to read about.
Yeah, I kind of agree, Irvin. I also, his rashness, he's just, very exemplary Gryffindor, just jumping into things without thinking, and that I don't think I would necessarily like so much if I was spending time with him. But especially during COVID, the whole, him being stuck in the house all the time and being isolated, I was like, yes. I have some real sympathy for you there. And I was like, I understand why you're in a terrible mood all the time. This is very understandable.
Right? Mid-pandemic, I'm I will also rush off to the Department of Mysteries. Say the word.
Yeah, I think for me, for a while, I was especially as I was younger, so I was why are you being so frustrating when you're supposed to be the adult? Even with factoring in 10 years of soul-sucking prison, I'm you're supposed to be the adult in this conversation. Harry is the adult, and that's, wrong. But then now that I'm in my 30s, I'm oh yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I have days where, I don't feel great and I say stupid stuff or do stupid stuff. And I'm and I haven't been to 12 years of soul-sucking prison, and I still do things where I'll be I'm so frustrating right now to anyone else around me. So I think I'm warming up to him a little bit more again.
And how are you supposed to mature at all while in Azkaban? I feel
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mentally he's trapped at 20 years old. So again, we're judging him as an adult because he is an adult, but mentally he's still 20 years old, and I think that's important to keep in mind.
And not only mentally 20 years old, but then you're adding on all of that trauma of all of those years with the Dementors. So he's had all of that trauma over all those years on top of the maturity of a 21-year-old. That's rough.
Yeah, I think in general I get annoyed with the fandom when they're he's just a bully and he is all about just risk and reward and having fun. And I'm you have no empathy if you were sitting there being yeah, he's the worst.
Yeah. I think it's easy to lash out at him because he can be so vicious.
Oh, like, so vicious.
I mean, a lot of the characters in Harry Potter, frankly, a lot of the adults, often, like, go below the belt, verbally, but, like, Sirius just, like, makes it an art form. Like, specifically, I think the one that always just, like, made me gasp a little is when he tells Harry, "You're less like your father than I thought." And I was like, that is, "Sir, how dare you?"
That's like a punch to the gut every time.
Harry, you don't need to be like that. Stop it. Stop thinking that. Stop thinking that way.
It might be true, right? It might be that he's got more of Lily in him in that moment, and that's a good thing. But the fact that Sirius is using it in that moment to twist the knife on an injury that Harry's already having a tough time with is not a very mature decision. But also, if my only friend is my 16-year-old godson who I feel responsible to as a parent, and I'm stuck inside as the pandemic, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, I know I might get COVID, but I want to come and see you," and my godson's like, "That's not a good decision." That's going to be disappointing, right? I would never, ever be like, "F you, kid," which is essentially what Sirius does.
Kinda, yeah. I think that, well, the problem with, I actually really like Sirius almost more because his flaws than his good parts, because I love flawed characters. But what we start with when we see the memory of James and Sirius, kind of specifically bullying Severus, I know this is where the fandom gets like the whole, he's a bully, why don't we don't like this guy, why do we even like think about him? It's just, he's grown up in such a verbally and perhaps even physically abusive situation that something like bullying someone who seems weaker than him doesn't seem bad to him. And you can see it very clearly in the way he reacts. And he carries that. Like, he doesn't have any time to process it. Straight out of school, he's getting arrested, basically. It's like, what is it? 3 years after he's graduated? It's like no time at all to be processing the way he's been raised. And he's during war.
3 years of being in the Order of the Phoenix, right? So he's like straight out of school into fighting Voldemort.
If anything, those traits of his have only gotten more vicious. So like this seemingly like cutthroat behavior has not gotten better. And then he basically snaps when Peter ends up killing 12 people like right in front of him and disappearing. So that's why he's laughing in front of everyone. Oh my God. It's just like he paints the worst picture of himself, and he does himself no favors, but he's a very interesting character with some very like vicious flaws.
Dumbledore has that great quote, right? That Sirius has not acted like an innocent man. It's like, like sometimes he does just make his own bed and has to lie in it.
And Grace, what you were saying about, he has this sort of trauma coming from his family, how he's been abused. Like, I think Snape also just represents that to him, because Snape is the Slytherin who's sort of going off with the Death Eaters, just like his younger brother Regulus is. And I think Snape just represents that, like, type of Slytherin that Sirius just hates, because that's, like, he has experienced a sort of abusive home with that. So, I'd understand why.
And he can't go after his brother. That's brilliant. So he goes after Snape instead.
Ugh, poor Sirius.
That's so good.
So, on a lighter note, there's actually a favorite character that is shared by two of our hosts, because I believe both Sophia and I will name Luna Lovegood as our favorite characters.
The two Hufflepuffs. What does that tell us?
The two Hufflepuffs.
Going with the Ravenclaw.
That said, Sophia and I are very different. Like, beyond, like, the Hufflepuffiness. Like, I'm sort of, like, the most extroverted person I know. Like, you know, I always want to be surrounded by a crowd of friends, like, living my fabulous New York City life at all hours of the night. And Sophia's more of an introvert and, like, you know, just wants a quiet life. And so the fact that we both latched onto Luna despite being so different, I feel like is going to be really interesting to explore.
Yeah.
I know for myself, growing up reading the books, I always identified with Hermione at the beginning because, like, you know, I was a smarty pants. I was a nerd. I was very, very good at school. And I was like, yes, Hermione, like, nerds all the way. And then as sort of the years went on, I began to, like, both identify with and aspire to be more like Luna. As I got older, I went to, like, much more academically rigorous schools. I went to Stuyvesant High School. I went to NYU. And so once I was surrounded by, like, you know, people who were also very, very good at school, like, being smart and getting good grades became a much smaller aspect of my personality once, like, everyone around me was also there. And so then sort of a lot more of my personality became, like, the fact that I'm, you know, kind of quirky. I march to the beat of my own drum. I'm, you know, a little odd because I'm obsessed with Harry Potter and so on and so forth. And so when that, like, came in, like, it really started in earnest in high school, and then, like, cemented in college. Then I began to identify with Luna a lot more. Sophia, I'm curious, did you, like, always, like, latch onto Luna as sort of your avatar in the series, or did it shift around for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, we don't get introduced to Luna until the 5th book, so probably actually for me as well, before I was introduced to Luna, Hermione was probably the person I most related to. I think partly Hermione's perfectionism and just that strong need to be good at school all the time and to never get anything wrong. Like, I think that I definitely related to as a kid. But pretty much as soon as I was introduced to Luna, I was like, oh, she's so much fun. And I think part of it was just, well, for one thing, I look sort of like Luna. I have, like, especially when I first started reading book 5, I had, like, very long blonde hair that I'd have sort of, like, wavy, and it was maybe a little bit messy and stuff. And I liked, like, fun earrings with, like, miniature food on them and stuff like that. So I just, aesthetically, I just, Luna appealed to me.
Well, by that logic, I should be the world's biggest Victor Crumb fan. And in fairness, I do think he's great.
Yeah, Victor Crumb's great, for sure.
Yeah, I like Victor Crumb.
Should have been Hermione's husband.
Yes. Yes. Victory all the way.
Oh, I like that.
Sorry, Sophia, go ahead.
What I really liked about Luna was just her imagination, or maybe she wouldn't think of it as imagination, but, like, I had an extremely active imagination as a kid, just, like, very much sort of internal world where I was constantly coming up with different fantasy and magic and stuff. And I also believed in magic, like, to a pretty late age. Maybe a lot of Harry Potter fans can relate to that. And I related to that part of her, and I just looked up to her because I think what she has that I don't have as much is just, she doesn't care what people think about her. And, like, she knows that people are making fun of her. And I think it bothers her a little bit, but it doesn't stop how she acts. And that was something that was really inspiring to me, especially when I was younger, where I often felt like a little bit strange or like I wasn't fitting in, but I cared a lot about the fact that I wasn't fitting in. And it was kind of nice to see this character who didn't really care about that, who's just going about doing her own things. I just found that very inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. Like, because again, I was the weird Harry Potter kid. Yeah, I mean, among other things, I was a weird kid in general. And like, kids can be cruel. And yes, I was odd and I was teased in elementary school. And just, yeah, like, Luna's complete equanimity, like, the fact that she just, like, does not care what people think about her, like, I also found completely inspiring, and I have pretty much gotten there. Like, at this point, I have full-on embraced the weirdness, and I feel like I've gotten there, but I think, like, Luna was a big part of that, of me being like, you know what? Yeah, like, I'll be the weird one like her, and I won't care, and I'll just, like, have my own friends.
I feel like the older that you get, I would love to say that like, this doesn't ever, like, come up again in life, that you think, like, I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm not going to care what anyone else thinks about me. This year's the year for me. I'm not going to think about that. And then it comes back up and you have to work through it again. So that sucks. But every single time I try to think of something like that, my dad gave me some really great advice when I was a kid, and he said, don't waste your time and energy trying to be cool, just because cool is just something that you perceive, like it's something that you like desire. So like you define your own cool, basically. So I never, from that point forward, I try to think in that mindset of like, cool doesn't exist aside from what you think it is. So I'm trying to be my version of cool as much as I can be. And I feel like Luna encapsulates that. I feel like she embodies the idea of just like being yourself. And I would love to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
I think what is so cool about fiction and literature is it opens up possibilities to see people in ways that you hadn't imagined before. And I remember that one of the first early on lessons was like the Luna Lovegood types. I don't know how many other New Englanders feel like this, but there's such a pressure to fit into sort of these more Puritan, long-lasting traditions, aesthetics, and there's like proper ways in which you're supposed to go about your life, right? Like even if you're a geek, it's supposed to be done this way. If you're a jock, it's supposed to be done this way. At least when I was growing up, that's how I felt. Mm-hmm. And Luna, having seen somebody that's just so comfortable in her own skin and able to express herself in what truly does seem odd to Harry and Ron and Hermione even at times, to see that and to still know that this person's like interesting, fascinating, I'd want to be around, was such an eye-opener for me in terms of like just being more comfortable around people being different.
And I think what's really amazing about that is that because Luna is so confident in herself, it means that she's able to sort of stand up for other underdogs. Like, okay, if we compare her to Lupin, who's one of my other favorite characters, Lupin really struggles to stand up to his friends for being bullies, because he like has so much really self-hatred, and these are the first people who have ever accepted him. So like he knows that it's wrong, but he doesn't stand up for it. Whereas Luna, like, you know, as soon as Harry says Voldemort's back, Luna's like, I believe you. Even if other people are going to judge me for it, like, I believe you. And she's the one who'll say stuff to Harry like, oh, you know, Ron is funny, but he can be really mean. Like, she's just willing to, you know, speak the truth of what she believes and stand up for people she cares about because she's so confident in herself. And I think that's just such an amazing character trait.
I want to cheer right now. She's so good. She's so wise. This is what I was trying to say.
She is.
She's got that high wisdom score.
And I also love the emphasis on friendship she places. I feel like we're going to be a broken record on this because, found family, our jam. But, like, again, because Luna's home life is maybe not everything one would wish, in a very different way from Harry's, she emphasizes friendship almost sort of over everything else. And I feel like the emphasis on friendship specifically, like over romance, is kind of rare in like the young adultish literature space that Harry Potter resides in. And just, I love it so much. One of my favorite moments, like, in the whole series is the painting on Luna's ceiling. Like, when Harry goes and he sees that on Luna's ceiling, it's just a painting of her 5 friends, like Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Neville, and just connected with a gold chain of the word friends, like, repeated over and over again. Like, I was bawling my eyes out when I read that in Deathly Hallows.
What an instant character indication, right? An instant character maker is what I call them. When in writing, you just get a single detail that instantly changes or solidifies your understanding of this character, because there's nothing quite so clear as a literal painting of people's faces with chains. It's like when people get tattoos of like someone's face. Like, okay, I understand what you're about right now.
Yeah. And I think what's so beautiful about that is like it made me realize that it's not just that Luna is just happy being independent and doesn't care at all what people think and like doesn't want to have a social life. It's like she clearly cares a lot about having friends, and yet she never tried to change herself to have friends. Even though she went for such a long time probably being really lonely because she didn't have friends, she never, like, tried to become someone else in order to get those friends. She just continued to be herself until she found the people who would accept her. And that's just so amazing.
Yeah. So amazing.
Oh my God, she's so wise. Oh my God.
And it really makes sense why people ship her with Neville, because you know, they both get this group to hang out with in Harry's 5th year when the DA is happening, and then Luna's even asking the next year, like, are we going to continue this, because this was nice because it felt like I had friends. And Harry's like, well, it's not really a reason for it, so
oh my God,
there's
kill
no
me.
DA.
That quote always kills me.
Yes.
He's like, I had friends.
Yeah.
Murder me immediately. I'm done.
And, you know, and partly Harry just is like, I just have my 2 friends, I'm good. He doesn't really want to reach out to be close friends with anyone else. And that's why, you know, we don't see what Neville and Luna do, because Harry doesn't actually make that much of an, you know, he doesn't really want to reach out and be like, oh, we're not doing the DA, but like, I'm going to make an effort and hang out with Luna. He doesn't. So it's no surprise that people are like, oh, Luna and Neville could probably be friends and even, you know, be more than just friends, because they would have met through that.
It is my OTP. Like, I love Neville Luna. Like, I will go down with that shit.
They're so sweet. Oh my goodness.
I don't know. I like her ending up with a Scamander a lot. I think that's a very sweet future for her.
Boo!
I mean, it's almost like we don't have to end up with the people from high school.
No, we don't.
Nice?
Neville and Luna do. Those 2 specifically do.
But doesn't Neville end up with Susan Bones?
Yeah.
So I want to say Hannah Abbott.
Hannah Abbott.
But either way, it doesn't matter because it should be Luna.
Oh. I always wanted to be Susan Bones so that his name could be Neville Boney Longbottom.
No, maybe they just combined the 2, like Neville Longbones.
Yes,
Neville
finally got rid of the bottom. Bone Bottom. That would be the Tim Burton version. Jack Skellington's little son. Bone Bottom.
Yeah.
Oh God.
So I remember when I was starting out my MuggleNet column, I was like about a year and a half in, and I was being, you know, marketed, for lack of a better word, on MuggleNet as the controversial columnist. You know, who will HP Boy 13 turn his acid quill to next? And so, because I am contrary about everything, including being contrary, I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to write a positive essay just to show I can. And so I wrote an article called Why Luna is Loved, like essentially talking about all of this. And sure enough, no one gave a shit. Like, there was not a single comment. Like, you know, people probably read it and they were like, yeah, no, Luna's great, no notes, moving on. And I was like, and so this is why they want a controversial columnist.
Yeah.
Sophia, you also wrote an essay about Luna as one of your earlier works on MuggleNet, right?
Yes, it's why Luna Lovegood is the bravest character. So I talked about some of the things I've already talked about in terms of her being brave of just, like, being herself and not caring what people think, but also sort of standing up for people. The other part that I talked about is just the way that she accepts things in life that can't change. This is sort of what you're talking about, Grace, with this wisdom, that she's really wise about death. And, you know, it's something that she talks about very honestly and understands that this is something that can't change, but that it's also something that you are going to grieve. There's also a really funny moment when everybody who ends up going to the ministry gets caught in Umbridge's office. And everybody is trying to fight the members of the Inquisitorial Squad. And Luna is just chilling, like staring out a window, like as if she's just like looking at the clouds. And I just find that so funny in kind of amazing way, because she just accepts that, like, okay, they caught me. I can't do anything right now. And I'm sure it, like, scares the shit out of the person who caught her, who are like, what is she doing? Like, why is she just, like, staring out the window. Like, I think that they are probably much more disturbed by that than by the rest of them who are like trying to fight their way out.
Because she's the only non-Gryffindor who's caught.
Yeah,
so the Gryffindors are like struggling and fighting. They're like, fight to the death. And Luna's like, well,
she's like, I'm going to save my energy here. And once we get free. And also just... Yeah, when she gets locked in Malfoy Manor with Ollivander, I mean, Ollivander says afterwards just how much sort of hope that Luna brought him in that place. And I could totally imagine that, like, her sort of accepting the fact that she's stuck there and that she's going to sort of make the best of it, maybe sort of tell stories to Ollivander about Crumplehorse Snorkax. And I think that's a undervalued type of bravery, of just accepting certain things that aren't going to change.
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off that, like, her attitude towards death and towards losing a parent was so meaningful for me to read, because I lost my dad a year before Order of the Phoenix came out, when I was 10 years old. He died of leukemia. It was shit. And I feel like in literature, most of the time you're reading sort of about the Harry model, right? Where, like, sort of he's an orphan and, like, you know, it's all he thinks about, and it's this just all-consuming angst about losing a parent, like, which is valid and necessary and all that. But the flip side of you lose a parent and it sucks and you're sad about it, but then life moves on. Like, I don't think I'd ever encountered that perspective on it until I got to Luna. And so she lost a parent around the same age as I had. I think it says her mother died when she was 9. And, like, her perspective on it, like, as someone who lost a parent at that age, and she's still very sad sometimes about it, but she doesn't spend every waking moment angsting, like, on the topic. Like, I felt so, like, seen and validated reading that, of, like, I guess I'm not a terrible person for, like, not crying about my dad every, like, moment of every day. I guess I really needed to hear it when Luna said it, reading Order of the Phoenix.
Oh, I agree 100%. I lost my dad also. We've talked about this before, at an early age, in a very similar way, also to cancer. And her portrayal of grief, I think, is, like, a very, like, realistic one, where I just remember her being like, oh, it was quite horrible. Like, I just, it's one of those things where after the processing happens over years and years, it's something that I believe comes back from time to time. It's something that you live with. But someone once said to me, and God, I forget who, it must have been, like, I don't know, but it's not that the grief lessens, it's that your heart grows in order to fill that space. So the lessons that you learn, you bring forward, and it's not that you ruminate on the loss. And she even shows this so clearly, because, like, she's gained wisdom from it. She's able to comfort people through it. She's able to keep a clear mind through a lot of really horrendous situations that she finds herself in. For example, the basement at the Malfoy Manor, the dungeon, basically. But I feel like she is the most dependable individual to give advice on that subject because of this.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, Luna.
Okay, wow, yeah. So that turned into a therapy session for us all.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, guys. We're fine. It's all good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. The two Gryffindors are just like, we love the people who charge into danger. And the Hufflepuffs are like, we have a lot of feelings that we want to talk about.
So
and the
who did the Slytherin pick?
The Slytherin with the person who wants the mass genocide of somebody?
Dude, burn the world down. There's nothing wrong with starting anew.
That's what a fever does. It takes out all the bad pieces, and then the body's healthy again.
Yeah.
I mean, he is the last remaining heir of Slytherin. So.
Yeah. Oh my God. Who else did she go with?
I have to say, I am so excited to, like, hear you talk about why you love Tom, because, like, I mean, it's one of the things you lead with, like, you know, I've always known that you love Tom and you're obsessed with him, but, like, I don't know that I've ever gotten, like, the full lowdown on why and how, so I am all ears.
What's hilarious is that I didn't even write it all down here. I'll give a brief overview as to my journey in loving different characters. I think originally I loved Harry. I was like diehard fan of Harry. And then I was like, oh, but I want a villain because I'm so edgy. So I love Draco.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then
me too.
at some point the wires switched and I was like, Draco's not that bad. I
He's
could
not
do
bad
better
enough.
than this. So I think that was, I was like, I'm just going to like Tom now. I think it was almost a dare to myself. And then it started to become not so much a dare as actually like a real thing. Like I very much love this character. But keep in mind, there's no forgiveness here. I'm not in love with Tom, but I love Tom. It's one of my favorite things is to love a flawed character because you can realize where their flaws are and where that could have been corrected. You can also revel in the villainous intent of every villain that I've loved, basically.
So you're saying you don't love Tom because you identify so strongly with him?
I think that there are aspects that I really like of Tom. I don't know about identify
Hatred
with.
of specific groups of people.
Come on.
Yeah, a tendency towards murder
Don't
to get
be
your
like
way.
that. I'm not racist. I promise. I'm not. I'm gonna spread rumors on your podcast the first time I'm on. No, I'm not racist, and I don't want mass genocide. Please don't think this. I love everyone. I'm so scared of hurting things that I don't even eat meat. I'm a vegetarian.
In fairness,
yes.
we never see Voldemort eat, so he could be a vegetarian, or he could
also
just
could be
like
vegetarian.
never eat. Yeah.
Well, that's another theory I have on Tom.
Is that he's a vegetarian?
I guess, no, not he's vegetarian. It's just that he doesn't eat. Like people who enjoy life eat, right?
Yeah, he drinks unicorn blood.
It's like that one quote from Caesar, have around me fat men. Like you can trust people more when you can see that they're actually enjoying themselves to a certain extent. Tom doesn't eat. He never fucking eats. You never see him enjoying life. And I think that's on purpose.
It's the way that Horcruxes work. Each Horcrux that eats, so Harry and Nagini get that sustenance goes into Voldemort.
Okay, I'm glad we've
I'm
clarified.
kidding. That is not true at all. 100% not.
I was like, and I like
Irvin has
past
pushed his
the battle.
sleeves up and is ready to brandish his wizard gun.
No, more like, oh my god, Horcruxes are the new fad diet. Like, I'm amazed more wizards don't make them then.
Please don't say that, because then America will love them. Okay. So I really genuinely believe that a story is only as good as its villain, and I have a bunch of notes written here as to why I think Tom is a very interesting villain. And I think, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I certainly do love to chat about Tom. So at first I realized that I found the character of Tom Riddle way more compelling than Voldemort himself, like Lord Voldemort. Because Tom seems to operate under more the guise of being deceptively knowledgeable, trustworthy, and even kind in certain circumstances. So you think of him with how he treated Harry, Ginny, Hetzibah, Helena. Like, these are people that he wanted to deceive and he used for his ends. And I think that's because he didn't have the power that he had as Voldemort. So Voldemort's kind of like this power cannon who simply destroys what doesn't suit him best. Now, I actually don't believe that anymore, because neither of these assumptions are completely correct. Rather, they're both a mixture of one another, because there is no Voldemort. Voldemort is an idealized, malignant, narcissistic mask that Tom wears in order to ignore his own weakness. So Voldemort has always existed. Tom has always existed. It's whether or not he's masking hard enough to be Voldemort. So... And
I love it.
Grace, if I can chime in, I actually wrote an essay about this, because that is our podcast version of There's an App for That, is Irvin's written an essay about it. It was about comparing and contrasting Voldemort and Grindelwald, but the point is that as Voldemort gets older, he essentially stops, like, manipulating people with nuance, because he feels he doesn't have to. Like, sort of, Tom Riddle, when we see him, is really good at manipulating people, at sort of, pretending to be nice and all of that. And the Voldemort we see, which essentially I use Voldemort to mean, like, the real-time Tom Riddle within the 7 books, he doesn't really do that. He never pretends to be nice or helpful or anything. It's just like, no, this is what I want, and I get my way, because otherwise you die. it's a very subtle difference in how the confrontation goes at the end of year one between the book and the movie. Because in general, I think, like, the Sorcerer's Stone movie did a fantastic job, like, adapting the story and everything. But the part where, like, Voldemort and Harry are facing off, in the book, Voldemort is just like, give me the stone. Like, here, why don't you give me the stone in your pocket? Better save your life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy. Now give me the stone unless you want Lily to have died in vain. So, like, there's no, like, feigned affection. There's no empathy. There's no way to, like, sort of appeal to Harry's, like, better nature or anything. It's just like, you do this thing, or you die. Whereas in the movie, Voldemort is much more manipulative about it. I actually found the script online. He says, "Don't be a fool. Why suffer a horrific death when you can join me and live? Bravery. Your parents had it too. Tell me, Harry, would you like to see your mother and father again? Together we can bring them back. All I ask for is something in return." So, like, again, it's a subtle difference, but it's completely different from how the Voldemort in the books operates, because by this time in the story, he's been too powerful for too long, and so he just doesn't bother with, like, masking who he really is.
That actually brings up a good point, because what we see in the book is what I would argue is perhaps a two-dimensional villain that feels like he has a third dimension. And we're not allowed to know that third dimension, because not only is your narrator hiding it, Harry, your mentor figure is also hiding it, Albus, and even Tom is hiding it. So you get the vague implication that there's something human about Tom, but you cannot put your finger on it, and you're not permitted to relate to it. And I think that's the part that intrigues me most about him. Why? I want to know. I want to know, like, when he was sad or upset or afraid. I want to know all of these things, because I really fucking love villains. I think that I think it would be amazing to learn the aspects that I feel were hiding away from us from all three of these individuals. I think that it could definitely qualify as a character that intrigues me and I want to know more about, but I have other characters planned for our other parts of the main discussion, so I'm happy about that. Also, one version of him is hot, and that's always fun. And the other version of him is a monstrous snake man. And he's also an emotionally dumb fucker who likes to monologue, and I don't see any downside here.
I do love a good villainous monologue, and Voldemort just makes it in art form.
Delivers every time.
Grace, pretend you're 16 again, and which Voldemort are you going with? You going with Chamber of Secrets actor, or are you going with Ralph Fiennes' nephew?
Chamber of Secrets actor, I would say.
Chamber of Secrets
actor for sure. Christian Coulson.
Yeah.
Couldn't remember his
name.
I'm
a nerd enough to know that name. Yes. Christian Coulson.
Yes.
Right.
He still looks the exact same way.
He's really kind. He's very nice. I met him once.
Yeah, I did too. He's a delight. Grace, did you watch his rom-com about the vampire and the accountant?
No, I've been meaning to. It looks really cute.
I met Christian Coulson at a screening of it in New York, and first of all, that movie is delightfully weird, and so is he.
That's always a comfort to hear. I love that. Please continue to stay weird, Christian Coulson. We're rooting for you.
Yes. I'm sure you're listening.
I'm sure he is.
I'm sure he is too. So listeners, you are in good company. You're just like Christian Coulson.
Get him on the pod. No, Grace, I think that this aspect of Tom Valdy that you're hitting on, like this idea that like Lord Voldemort actually doesn't exist. This is a persona that Tom Riddle puts on in order to get an edge on the power, right? If people aren't being let in, if they're just seeing this facade, it's a lot like royalty. There's this great story about, I think it's Louis XVI who endures the French Revolution and eventually is beheaded. You know, there's Louis XVI the person and Louis XVI the King Louis, the royalty. And when they caught King Louis, as he was trying to flee France from the revolution, he was on the upstairs part of a barn. And so they are managed to negotiate with the mob. You can only send one person in to arrest him. And because they had like this such like, oh my gosh, there's this vision of royalty, they only like, they agreed. And so this one person went up, and apparently King Louis was like, no, you cannot arrest me. I am God ordained. And this guy's like, oh, okay. And then finally, like, you know, common sense overcame that. But it's this idea of like, there's a mirage of power that people can cultivate sometime, and you bestow it upon you like a mental armor. And the fact that Voldemort does that with that title, and the fact that Albus doesn't allow him to keep that on, right? He's always piercing through it immediately to the person. I just think it's a wonderful piece of commentary that you've nailed.
It's certainly interesting as a piece of commentary, especially between Tom and Albus, just because Albus is doing it for one reason, and there's several other reasons that you could be doing that for. But Albus is doing it to control the conversation, I think. So to gain back the power that he felt would be taken away.
If I can push back, don't you think that Tom Riddle has essentially become Lord Voldemort? Like, has, like, essentially, he's been living full time under this persona for, at this point, decades. So, like, don't you think that at that point, like, he is who he says he is Lord Voldemort?
I mean, can you become a mask?
According to Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Do you ever lose the true weakness within you?
I thought part of it was the Horcruxes, so he became less and less human with every Horcrux he made.
That was exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
I mean, watching Tom is a lesson in trauma. Like, you cannot escape that trauma. That trauma builds him into... It builds his weakness, basically. I don't think that he's become Lord Voldemort. You cannot become your own mask. Like, you're always built off of a foundation, and if you do not face the sort of the demons that plague you, that foundation, that those like fears, those traumas don't just disappear, and you're left with like the more powerful self you imagined yourself as. No, you crumble. You crumble under that.
Yeah, you become brittle.
Yes. So I do believe that Tom is Tom.
I think it also depends on how, sort of what philosophical view you're taking on life, right? If you're taking on the life of like, we all start out as a blank slate, I think it's easier to like come into this idea that you can shift permanently away from who you might have been. If you're coming in with like, you're predestined with some way or another, maybe you're thinking, no, Lord Voldemort is him. If you're coming in like me, where you're like, no, I think that there is goodness in everybody, and that evil is a built mask that if the more we make impenetrable, the harder it is to crack beneath the surface. I think that there is a bit of Tom down there, which could be remorseful, regretful, and, good, way, way deep down, far beneath the mask.
Well, what's interesting, Sam, is also, I think, on top of what you're saying of different views of the world, it's also how much are we incorporating magic into our understanding of Voldemort? Mm-hmm. Because to Aureo's point, I think we are sort of led to believe that the creation of these Horcruxes is fundamentally changing who Tom Riddle is. That he is becoming less human over that time. And that's sort of how I'm interpreting sort of the points that Irvin was making about how Tom stops using some of those more manipulative tactics. That could also be part of becoming less human. Like when Tom was more human, he's sort of understanding human nature and he's using it to his advantage. But over time, he loses that connection with other humans.
That's correct, but he always has the master soul. Like, he cannot survive without having the master soul. So there will always be a piece of Tom in him.
Of course, but how does that change because of this magic? That's the part that is sort of more nebulous, that I'm not sure if we can understand completely.
Yeah, I think that's in text. It's such a gray water, right? Because is it that he's not being manipulative and not understanding the humanity of other people because he himself has lost his humanity? Or is it because he doesn't need it anymore? Because he has built up his power and his army in order to the fact where he can sort of displace with the pleasantries and move along.
It could be a combination.
An excellent question.
Yeah. I mean, my interpretation was always more the latter. Because and this is a little bit beyond the scope of this conversation, but one of my favorite things about the Potter series, and not of the Fantastic Beasts movies, is that for all the, like, super powerful, magical, like, mumbo-jumbo going on, like, it all comes back to, like, people and characters, and, like, you know, people do things because they feel a certain way, or they, you know, are a certain way or whatever, and it's not so much magic changing who they are as magic just, you know, being a thing that is happening, and they are who they are because they're human.
Yes. But also, Irvin, I think that magic can be used, like, kind of as a metaphor in a way, in that it's not so much that the magic of the Horcruxes is necessarily changing Voldemort, or it kind of is, but he is killing people in order to create those Horcruxes. And that act of killing is maybe what is changing him and changing his humanity. And in that more metaphorical way, it's like, yes, he is actually changing because of the magic, but it's because of that character change as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I can get behind that.
On a separate note, why is it that every time I'm on an episode, the word Horcruxes manages to make its way into the title? I just need
that
to know
is just
this.
a potential one, okay?
That is
the floor is
title.
open for suggestions.
No.
Well, this is a peek behind the curtain,
closed.
Everyone listening. One of the potential titles, I don't know if it is, because you're in the future already, but it's Horcruxes are the new fad diet.
Horcruxes stand for grace. What?
Oh no!
Horcruxes equals grace? Question mark?
I didn't mean to make this happen. I also didn't mean to start a conversation on magical theory. All this to say, I really like villains. I think is a good one. I think you'll think so too.
So, Grace, if somebody was like, you can't pick Voldemort, who is the next villain that you're picking as like, okay, then if I can't pick Voldemort as the best villain of Harry Potter, then who is it? Is it Dumbledore? Is it Draco? Is it Bellatrix? Is it Peter?
Oh, you know what? This is actually a personal choice because, like, I don't have as much to back this up. Because honestly, it should be someone like Umbridge because she's like a very good villain.
Right, that's the first one I thought of.
But I will say I personally am more terrified of Fenrir. And I think that's just because I've grown up a woman. Like Fenrir seems like the kind of person that like just basically haunts my nightmares.
Fenrir's a good one.
Yeah. Fenrir is terrifying. Like, honestly, I'd rather be killed by Tom than by Fenrir.
Yeah,
at least
absolutely.
Tom will make it quick. He's got nothing to get from me. He doesn't want to torture any information. It's fine. It'll be quick, done. He's out of here.
I mean, you and Dumbledore
So
both,
am I,
right?
for that
Dumbledore's the
matter.
one who's like, hey, don't let them play with their food. Snape, just do it quick.
Yeah. Gross. So, Grace, you actually kind of mentioned this, that, like, you know, Tom's your favorite, but he's also who you want to know more about. And I think since we've gone down our favorite characters, and with the possible exception of Grace, they're characters that we, like, love and relate to and identify with.
As always, yeah.
I feel like it's a separate question, is which character most intrigues you? Like, so for me personally, this one is kind of a no-brainer. For me, it's Albus Dumbledore, and, like, every time anyone asks me who my favorite character is, like, they almost are like, I mean, I don't know why I'm bothering to ask. You've written a book about Dumbledore. And they're always shocked when I say that my favorite character is Luna, but it's like, yeah, well, she's the one I like the most, but, like, there's not a lot to, like, ponder about Luna. Like, you know, it's pretty much she is who she says she is. Whereas with Dumbledore, oh, there is so much to ponder about Dumbledore. I wrote a whole ass book about it.
Dumbledore is such an interesting and sometimes scary and sometimes very wise individual for me. The more that I read for the things I'm currently studying to perhaps turn into something else, the more that I keep looking at this character, like, what is happening here?
Yeah, he's the character that changes my perception of changes the most as I read through it. Because, you know, as a little kid, he's like, oh, look, Grandpa, yay. And then when, I don't know, you're just turned 30, it's sort of like, you know, I kind of have issues. We have issues, bud. We have bad blood.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, you know, I grew up, like, obsessing over these books, and so for so many years, like, Dumbledore was the personification of, like, wisdom and goodness for, like, my entire childhood. Yeah. So, like, the deconstruction of that in Deathly Hallows was such, like, an emotional gut punch to me. And honestly, it took me a decade to work out my feelings. Like, essentially, the reason I wrote a book about Dumbledore is because I was trying to reconcile my own feelings on the subject of the, like, but he's so good. But then he did this horrible thing of, like, raising Harry for slaughter. And, like, because, like, literally every time I reread the books, like, you know, must have been like a dozen times, like, I would bawl my eyes out when he died in Half-Blood Prince, and then I would be so mad at him in Deathly Hallows, and just, yeah, it took me a decade and a book to work that out for myself.
He's too interesting. Gotta tone it down. Make him dumber. Come on. Yeah. Too much.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't want the Fantastic Beasts movies to not be about Beast and Newt, but then they were like, oh, but we could talk more about Dumbledore. I was like, I'm slightly interested, and damn you, why am I slightly interested?
I think that's why the Fantastic Beasts movies have sort of suffered in the last two, though, is because they can't decide what the story's about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're terrible. Like, let's not get started. But, like, If they had picked someone else, I would have been like more openly, that's so stupid. But I'm still interested enough to learn more about Dumbledore's backstory that I'm like, I kind of want to see it.
I mean, but the thing is, like, Dumbledore's backstory, that is like a full-time storytelling job.
Yes.
Like, it does not work to have him, like, among an ensemble of 14.
Correct. Through the lens of a different cast, right? Like, we're supposed to...
Right, like, as butchered by, like, David Yates and all the filmmakers. Like, no, if like, we want the story of Dumbledore, like, we need the story of Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Like, no wizarding Pokemon, no Newt Scamander, like, none of that. And so sort of, if we couldn't have that, I never wanted the half-assed version. So sort of, the more they were like, and now Albus Dumbledore, I was like, but do we have to?
For real.
I was honestly terrified. Honestly. And, like, I'll be real with you. I've got so much respect for the people who made the movie, the script writers, everyone who puts so much work into it. But I am almost certain that there is someone out there who has written a fan fiction that is so artfully done about the history of Albus Dumbledore that probably nothing can stand up to it. There's so many good fan fiction authors out there. I am astounded.
Grace, if you have a really, really good Dumbledore fanfic, or listeners, if you have a really good Dumbledore fanfic, please send them my way.
Oh, God, yes. I haven't had time to read fanfiction in forever, but I will try to make time because, like, holy crap, some of those authors are so good.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about y'all, but I read a lot of fantasy growing up, and, like, the saintly mentor, like, is posthumously revealed to be a flawed human being is such a brilliant inversion of fantasy tropes.
Yeah.
Like, brilliant, genius. Like, because the fact that, like, Dumbledore was the personification of goodness and he would prepare Harry and he would die towards the end, like, yes, like, check, ticking all the boxes for fantasy. Like, when he died in Half-Blood Prince, like, did I cry my eyes out? Yes. Did I see it coming? Also, yes. But then, like, in Deathly Hallows, after we just spent 2 years mourning Dumbledore, when it's like, wait, he's not perfect. I was like, what? Like, I still think that is among the absolute best, like, bits of writing that Joe's done, is knocking Dumbledore off his pedestal.
I think it's one of the best bits of really showing and understanding that the characters are growing up and that the audience was growing up. I think a lot of people, you know, they mark, like, 18 and characters' ability to have sex as like the marker of now our audience is grown. And to me, that's always like a really narrow-minded way of thinking about growth.
Stunted, for sure.
Yeah. The idea that what I once thought was pure and good is actually flawed and difficult to grasp, I think is one of the better understandings of what it is like to grow up.
Definitely. Yeah. And also, I just think an understanding that the people in charge, that being in charge, like being in a leadership position like Dumbledore's, where, I mean, yes, he's the headmaster, but I'm thinking more like leading a whole, like, Order of the Phoenix, trying to
like
take down Voldemort.
Yeah.
Like, that is a really challenging position to be in that is always going to require some sorts of sacrifices, some sorts of really difficult decisions that are sometimes going to hurt some people, that you're always going to sort of be trying to balance and compromise because you're never going to find a perfect solution. And I thought that was really helpful for me at that age when I was reading that, to realize, oh yeah, the people who are in charge, it's not just like they can do everything perfectly and never have to make any difficult decisions. It's like part of growing up and part of having some leadership is that you're always going to be making compromises.
Yeah. I agree. I love that about Dumbledore. I have very little patience for the people who are like, Dumbledore is the Antichrist because he did this thing. And I was like, you maybe want a little more nuance with that, like just a smidge. I remember when my book was coming out, I made pins. Essentially, one said Dumbledore's man through and through, and the other one said life and lies, to sort of allow people to pick which side they fell on. And Laurie Kim, who's brilliant, was like, can I request the third option that just says, he did the best he could?
Yes, that would be the one that I would take.
So yes, I did make those, and those have proven very popular.
I mean, that's great. The difficulty with all fandom conversations, though, is, and I mean, not just fandom, you look into real world, is like what sells is picking a side and sticking, not nuance of like, hey, you know what? Dumbledore had a very, very difficult situation to be put in where he's like, I'm pretty sure Harry's a Horcrux. So let's see if we can get him to survive somehow. But ultimately, he's probably going to have to die if we want Voldemort to go away permanently.
Yeah, I feel like learning about Dumbledore's past is an exercise in empathy. Like, you really do have to start thinking of things more, like thinking of his story realistically and why he acted the way he did. I feel like it's such an interesting part of trying to connect to a character and trying to connect to actions. Like, I love that. I love that section. I love when you learn he's kind of a jackass. I also love when you love Dumbledore. Like, I think these are two so necessary, so interesting parts of the books.
I think that the thing that makes Dumbledore more different to other, like, adults, like, you know, remember when you went to school and you had that really cool teacher or something? Like, if you were to see them now as an adult, you'd probably be like, oh, actually, I can see stuff that's maybe less cool, or like I wouldn't, you know, consider. But the thing is with Dumbledore is like, even all the adults, even the other characters we meet, even the people that, you know, are supposedly higher viewed or regarded in that society are still like, no, Dumbledore's the best.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we are introduced to people like Fudge as the ministers, like, oh no, I have to ask Dumbledore what I'm going to do.
Yeah. They followed his word, like cult of personality without question, for sure. So
even, you know, like you as a school like kid, you're like, oh, he's like the greatest wizard. But like even then you're like, and all the other adults from outside my school world also think that.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
Except for Lucius Malfoy, who somehow is on the Board of Education.
It's money, baby. Yeah. That's what dollars do to you. Make it rain.
Also, I just gotta say, like, this part isn't intriguing about Dumbledore, but it is entertaining. The man is hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the way he formulates a comeback, or, like, you know, just his wry commentary, just
these are
goals.
manners.
Goals right there.
It's one of my favorites. Is on death's doorstep. What are these little jokes? No. These are manners.
Yes. And then he follows that up with, reflexes aren't as sharp as they used to be. It's like, yes, old age. Something you'll get to experience if you're lucky.
Yeah. Great lines.
Sass.
Sass for days.
This is why we need his backstory, so I can see him studying with, 1950s comics and being like, so what would you say here?
Yes. And it's also a small thing, but one of the things I love about Dumbledore is he knows he's fabulous.
Yeah.
And, doesn't apologize for it. I think the quote of Dumbledore's that I use more than any other, and this may reveal a lot more about me than anything else, is, forgive me the lack of seemly modesty.
Don't worry, Dumbledore. I forgive you. It's okay.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, no, ain't nobody got time for seemly modesty.
And I think that's helpful, I think also if you think about kids reading the books, and that Dumbledore has humility. He can admit his mistakes. He admits to the fact that he's not always right about things, that he can misinterpret things. And he admits to Harry, who's a kid, that, yeah, he doesn't always do everything right. But he also doesn't pretend that he's less smart than he is. And I think that's a really good life lesson to learn, is you shouldn't have false modesty, but you should be able to have some ability to be humble when you realize your mistakes. I think it's a great quality of his.
Absolutely.
Agreed. So that's Albus Dumbledore. Obviously the character who intrigues me the most. Everyone go to lifeandliesofdumbledore.com. But for the rest of you, I feel like the character that intrigues you guys the most is more of an open question. So I'd love to hear what some of your characters are. The characters that keep you up at night just thinking about them.
I'm not sure it's quite that serious.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know that I have a character. That's a lot of pressure on Aurelia to be like, yep. Here's the character that keeps me awake.
Well, okay, apparently not everyone is kept awake at night thinking about Harry Potter characters, which I don't know what y'all are doing on this Harry Potter podcast then, but carry on.
Aurelia, it's just like, how many games did McGonagall bet money on?
Trick question, it was all of them.
I was like, for me...
How much money did she make off of betting on Quidditch?
So I picked McGonagall. I think I've never not found sleep because of her, so maybe I misunderstood this category. I mean, partially Dumbledore was already taken, and as I said earlier, he's sort of Irvin's to take. So I think there's a lot of characters you could pick here. I do really like McGonagall. I think it's quite interesting that even though we're going through the story from a Gryffindor perspective, we're not seeing her as much as we potentially could. So, she is the head of house, but, is she ever really doing anything with that title? Sort of yes, I know she's here and there, but, she's not very prominent in the Gryffindor Tower. But she is clearly badass. She is an animagus. She is really good at transfiguration, and she is part of the order, so there is lots there to discover and to find out more. And I know whatever it's called these days, it's not Pottermore anymore, and I cannot keep up with the names.
The website once known as Pottermore.
Yeah, let's go with that. I know there once used to be backstory for her, which then has changed because they figured out they up the age and she was now suddenly in Fantastic Beasts, and none of that made sense. But if you had the chance of reading it, that was actually quite interesting, and it sort of just further made me want to know more about her. And I kind of want to almost say that she should have been more prominent in the order. Maybe she chose to not be as prominent in the order. Maybe she was more prominent during the First War. We obviously don't see that. So I'm like...
I think that might be a bit of Albus interfering. I think Albus wanted kinda, sorta, ish, to have a separation between, like, you know, Hogwarts and the Order, where, like, it wasn't just that everyone who worked at Hogwarts was automatically in the Order.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Although she does...
Especially...
She's at Grimmauld Place once. They spot her once at Grimmauld Place in Order.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is still part of the Order, but I think we do see that then with Slughorn, where he's like, oh, but, like, everyone who works at Hogwarts needs to be, like, in the Order of the Phoenix. And I don't want to do that. So, yeah, I do see that point. So maybe that is why. But there could also be that she was like, look, I just don't want to have as active as a role in this anymore. We don't know that. And to be fair, it's not the only job she has. She's also deputy head. And, you know, considering how much Dumbledore is not around or dealing with ministry stuff.
By all intents and purposes, it seems deputy headmistress is a title for actual headmaster.
Yes.
Yes, all of the work, none of the prestige.
Exactly.
I get to sign the forms, and I do it in green ink.
So she has a lot on her plate. But yeah, I think we've already touched upon it. She's a big Quidditch fan. She used to play Quidditch until she got injured. So surely there's more to learn about her. And she is sort of a mother figure, even though we don't see it as much. I think it also depends on your relationship with her. Like, clearly Harry has a somewhat better relationship with her than some of the other Gryffindors may have. But, like, she is strict, stern, sometimes coming off a bit too distant, but she does really care, and she does really want to push students to be the best versions of themselves, really. And she is, she doesn't favor her house to almost a fault.
I love how actionable she is as a teacher. She does not waste time in understanding what the right thing to do is. One of the big case in points for that is when Dumbledore gets kicked out of school in Chamber of Secrets, and immediately she's like, great, okay, teachers, you're going to be escorting everyone. Like, an actual safety plan goes into play as soon as Dumbledore leaves the school, which I think is hilarious.
It's probably she was begging for that to happen.
The entire time.
Dumbledore was like, no.
It'll be fine. We already know who it is. Well, who is it,
no
Albus?
Safer place.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. It's not
Don't
Hagrid,
worry about
though.
it. It's fine.
I also like that she keeps a very firm teacher aesthetic, and that she doesn't change it based off of bias. So, like, you know, it could be very easily that she could favor Harry maybe a little bit more, or favor Hermione a little bit more, you know, smartest witch of her age in Gryffindor. But she maintains that, and it seems like what she's doing then is she's really looking at who her students are and what the student data is, and really trying to curtail everything to the student and not the person. So from a teaching standpoint, she's one of the more brilliant teachers. Of course, she's got a very strict personality, but at least expectations are clear with her students, and she doesn't fuss around.
Yeah. And I mean, she did buy Harry a broom. So.
I mean, she
favors Quidditch, if anything. Maybe not Harry, but
that's outside of her Transfiguration classroom. That's fine.
Well, and she goes out of her way to get time turners for all her students whenever they want to take more classes, because, like, almost every student we know who got 12 owls and therefore must have had a time turner was from Gryffindor. Right? Because it was Bill, it was Percy, and it was Hermione.
And Barty Crouch Jr.
But what about Barty Crouch?
And Barty Crouch is the only non-Gryffindor of the lot. So I think just Minerva's like, oh, you want to take more classes? Great. Time turner, please.
They've got a whole, like, order form that they have set aside just for that.
Yeah.
Already pre-stamped with MM on it.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, she's already the deputy head, and we've already talked about how she is actually doing the work, so...
Basically.
Who's going to stop her?
Also, I just want to say, if I could own McGonagall's entire wardrobe, I would wear it
Please
daily.
And thank you. Yep.
Oh my god, I want that aesthetic so bad. It's like the very elegant, witchy...
You like tartan?
Yeah, sure. I don't
She's
mind.
Scottish, of course.
Everything, please.
I just want to be a cat all day.
Right? That was the part that I want.
I don't get you people.
Do you guys think that McGonagall went back and, like, checked on Harry at the Dursleys every few years, like, as a cat to see if he was doing
100%.
okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe she, like, goes to
all the
Mrs.
fan
Figs
fiction
as one of her
indicates she
cats.
did.
Yeah.
As Fig, Arabella Figs. That's funny.
That'd be really funny.
I think my last point about McGonagall is she's Scottish, and I love Scottish accents, and she is hella sarcastic, and I am always here for all of the sarcasm we get. And we do get a lot of good sarcasm in these books, but yeah, McGonagall's definitely up there.
Yep.
There's a lot of sass, for sure.
So yeah.
Indeed. Well done, McGonagall.
I mean, speaking of really good teachers, we've got another one coming right up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about
Quirrell.
Lupin. What was that?
I'm sorry, Sophia. Go ahead. I said Quirrell as a
Quirrell.
joke.
Well,
Don't
he's
do
coming up
this.
too, but-
Please don't do this.
I mean, Umbridge thinks that Quirrell was a good teacher. There was a ministry-approved curriculum.
Exactly.
he might have been the only teacher to even have a curriculum, just period.
Touche.
Very,
Aside
very
from maybe
true.
McGonagall.
I think Lupin has a curriculum. It's, like, pretty consistent what he teaches throughout the year for them.
Just very one-sided.
Well, yeah, but, like, if all of the other years had had good curriculums, then that would have made sense. It would have been like, this
Correct.
is the year that
100%.
you spend on magical, dangerous creatures, and this is the year you spend on curses. Like, it would have been fine if it had been, like, a 7-year-long curriculum, but, yeah. Anyway,
Yes, indeed.
I think Lupin's a very good teacher because he has this sort of hands-on education, and he treats all of his students with respect, and... I mean, I really appreciate McGonagall as a teacher, but she does have that more sort of strict persona as a teacher, whereas Lupin is less like that. But all of his students still listen to him and respect him. And I think because they know that he respects them back and treats them like they have something to contribute. What I find intriguing about Lupin is... Maybe I'm cheating here, but what I find intriguing is not just Lupin, but his relationship with Snape. I wrote an essay about this called, Is Lupin the Only One Who Understands Snape? On MuggleNet. And it's interesting because if we're comparing him to Sirius and Snape just continue with that same bitterness and hatred and anger throughout their adult lives. And Lupin is the only one of the Marauders generation who we see kind of starting to leave some of that behind, at least later on in his life. He says, I neither like nor dislike Severus. And it feels very mature. He's sort of saying, he helped me out in this difficult time, and he's on my same side. We're probably never going to be best friends, but we're going to work together. And I really like that from him. And I think they just really understand each other, or I think Lupin understands Snape. To what extent Snape thinks about this with Lupin is debatable, but Lupin understands Snape as a spy. Lupin also acts as a spy among the werewolves, and I think understands how isolating that can be, how being a spy, you're always in danger, which means you're putting anyone around you in danger too. I think they both have a tendency to sort of push away people who could be close to them because of not really liking themselves that much. And I think part of what intrigues me about Lupin is that he is mature, but he also it's still really complicated because there are ways in which he doesn't act very maturely, especially what we see in Deathly Hallows. And part of that is from this struggle to accept himself, he then pushes other people away. And this is something that I can, I think that Lupin's struggles with mental health is something that I can relate to. And he seems to be really good at helping Harry with his mental health, sort of helping him with the Dementors, probably because he has difficulties with Dementors himself. He actually admits that. He says he's not an expert on Dementors. So because he's struggled with his mental health, I think he understands Harry's trauma and is able to help Harry with his trauma, but he has trouble applying those ideas to his own life, which is relatable. I feel like all of us are better at giving advice to other people than we are at helping ourselves. But I wonder what Lupin's life would have looked like if he had had James and Sirius by his side throughout his adult life, who were accepting him and sort of helping him be more confident, trying to, like, get jobs for him and, like, you know, filing petitions with the ministry for werewolf regulation, like werewolf rights. I feel like his life could have been a lot different if he'd had those friendships.
Yeah.
I feel like Lupin's life was in black and white until he went to Hogwarts, and then it was in color until James and Lily died. And then it was a sad French film in black and white again until we meet him in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Or you get back like a few colors, but not the whole palette, just a few.
No, just the burgundy and then the crisp autumn gold colors that they show off in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Wow, this really is a French film, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, it's kind of like what we were saying with Sirius, where, like, what's interesting is, like, the tragedy of it all. And I mean, I would argue that with Lupin, like, just as much tragedy as Sirius, because, like, you know, he lost it all when Sirius was carted off to Azkaban.
He lost James, because James was dead. He lost Peter, because Peter he thought was dead, but then realized had betrayed James. And he lost Sirius because Sirius went to Azkaban. So he just lost all of his friends in one night and then had to spend, like, the next 13 years without able to find, like, not being able to find any steady work, not being able to have friends or close relationships, just, struggling on the outskirts. Yeah, that's terrible.
And it took Dumbledore 13 years to be like, hey, this
you should come
old
teach.
Order of Phoenix guy.
Isn't that ridiculous?
You know, I should give him a call. I wonder
oh my god, I forgot about that dude. Is he still around?
Yeah.
Oh my god, is he alive?
Just saying, that's because the Defense Against Dark Arts position does not have a very high survival rate.
That is fair. That is fair.
I think Dumbledore didn't want to, like, play that card until it was strictly necessary.
I want to live in the headcanon of Dumbledore reading the news about Sirius Black and be like, you know who I should call for Defense Against the Dark Arts job?
Oh my god, do you remember that kid? Oh my god, Minerva, get in here. That kid, you remember him? Rumus or whatever the
Rumus?
Should we, like, get a werewolf to teach, with, like, hundreds of kids around?
All right, I will not stand for this slander of Albus Dumbledore, okay? He calls Lupin for the defense position because right before that, Umbridge passed some anti-werewolf legislation that made it impossible for Lupin to get a job.
That's true.
This is too kind of canon. We need to make a headcanon.
Dumbledore stepped in when Lupin needed him most.
I will say that I think that Lupin might not have taken the job earlier, because I think he might have been like, it's not safe for me to be around kids. Like, what if something happened? And that he might have not have taken the job, but now that he knows Harry is at Hogwarts, I think he just, like, he wouldn't have been able to resist coming to Hogwarts and seeing Harry and developing more of a relationship with him. So I think that was part of it. Maybe Dumbledore had been asking him for a while and he was just resisting it.
Yeah. I think that there's actually many reasonable reasons as to why he didn't get the job until Harry's third year. The headcanon of Dumbledore secretly just being like, oh, first thought, best thought is really, really hilarious to me.
Oh, God. That's another person who I would love the outfits of. Not Lupin. I'm so sorry. I love you, Lupin. But not Lupin.
I was going to say, like, is that really the aesthetic we're going for?
I mean, maybe if I'm putting my pajamas on. Yeah.
Grace just wants to be a 1990s professor. Grunge, but with a suit.
Oh, man. I just want to look magical. If I can look magical, I've achieved it.
Grace, you always look magical.
Thank you! You know who isn't very magical, though?
Who?
I'm so sorry to say this, too.
The guy with the iguana.
The character that intrigues me most. Quirinus Quirrell. Professor Quirrell, like a squirrel.
Poor stuttering Professor Quirrell.
Yeah, I there's not a ton to say about Quirrell because there's not even a ton that's said in the series. This is everything that he said that's said about him is from outside of the series. Like there's a thing on Pottermore about it, and I famously do not consider anything outside of the books to be canon, so that's not canon technically.
And the Pottermore thing about Quirrell is so messy that I also will not consider it canon. Like that was very shoddy work.
It was interesting, I will say, because it presents the idea of like him being much more academic than he is in like performative magic.
Yeah,
and he actually reiterates the lesson that Luna teaches us, which is you really do need to find like your own self and have confidence in your own self rather than looking for power elsewhere to bolster you, which is what he does. Like he doesn't consider himself to be enough, so he agrees to this deal of like, oh, I can be more powerful and more respected if I just invest time in the dark arts and also help out this random crazy Voldemort spirit that's just chilling around Albania. Nothing can go wrong here. But I like the lesson that teaches. I would love to know more about this character. I think that he is intriguing. Mm-hmm. But I think that it just drills into the canon that he was like this naive individual.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of sorry for that because sometimes I myself feel quite naive. So I just honestly, I do feel very sorry for Quirrell. And every time people make fun of him, both people from the good side and the bad side, because they both take their pot shots, I just feel bad for him.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he's the only Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher that taught the position twice that we meet. Right? He's the only Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher that we meet that taught it twice.
No, he was Muggle
didn't.
Studies teacher before.
Oh, I thought he did Defense Against the Dark Arts and then he went out to go come get more experience. That's my bad.
No.
I think in the books
Sorry,
they don't
listeners.
specify, but I think on Pottermore is when it said he was a Muggle Studies. Or maybe it's an interview. I can't remember which.
Yeah. So the fact that he taught Muggle
book.
Studies is Apocrypha. The Sorcerer's Stone is a little nebulous on the topic because it does talk about him, like, returning to teach.
Yeah.
But I don't think it ever explicitly says he taught dark arts before. And later on, once Joe was, like, a little more careful about these things, Dumbledore does say that, like, you know, no Defense Against Dark Art teacher has lasted more than a year. Which, like, includes, like, as in no defense teacher has, like, you know, taught more than a year consecutively or non-consecutively.
Hence why Dumbledore just didn't oscillate between Gilderoy Lockhart and Remus Lupin for 12 years.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Quirrell definitely, like, suffers from being in the first book and sort of, like, not being as well developed as all the other professors.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's something so Shakespearean about his character. Both, you know, in Hamlet, there's that famous line of, there's no good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And he's sort of kind of the personification of a person who buys into that ideology. And then also is like, he's this huge... There's all these red herrings taking it away from Quirrell the whole time. And so most of Quirrell's character is sort of made up off screen, which is a very Shakespearean thing to do with some villains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a fun parallel to Tom, right? Because Tom comes up with a persona that is much more fearsome and impressive and mystical than he is, whereas Quirrell does the exact opposite once possessed with Tom.
Yeah. It keeps a lot of watchful eyes off of him, but not really, honestly. Other people's watchful eyes.
Yeah.
He's got literal watchful eyes on the back of his head.
It's interesting, though, that Tom uses that position he cursed twice, and he wanted to teach it, or supposedly wanted to teach, and he uses it twice to get into Hogwarts.
I actually wrote a MuggleNet article about that, which I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but something about...
Oh my god, yes! That was a fantastic one.
Defense Against the Dark Arts... Jinx. Okay. We'll have to put it.
We'll link it. We'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Because I need to read that now too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, I want to expand it because, I wrote it back when I had to write in 850 words, and that is not nearly enough for this topic.
No, when I heard that, like, other MuggleNet writers have to, like, keep at 850 words, I was like, 850 words, that's like my introduction.
Yeah.
It's the constant struggle of no one reads anymore. And so we were like, we need to shorten this. And then the people who actually want to write and read, they were like, that's not enough words. And we're like,
Yeah. True facts. So Quirrell is perhaps the only character who is more developed in Harry Potter musical than he is in the books.
Oh, 100%.
I know, right?
We're
oh my god.
different as can be.
It's so perfect. I want to rewatch that now very badly.
Can you imagine
Sophie's so
Quirrell
good.
as a Muggle studies professor, though? Isn't that ridiculous, considering that he then goes off to...
Learn about how awful Muggles are by this one other dude. Yeah.
Well, first of all, no one ever said he was a good Muggle.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like, he must have been terrible. Like, I wonder if Muggle studies used to just be like, this is how terrible the Muggles are.
Well, but Quirrell isn't even the worst Muggle studies professor we see, because Alecto Caro takes over the subject.
Yeah,
I was
true.
also going to say, I don't think, even if it wasn't the best subject, I don't think under Dumbledore it would be terrible. Like, I don't think under Dumbledore Muggle studies would be Muggles are stupid.
There are lots of terrible classes under Dumbledore. I rate
That
him
is
to
true.
magical
Like, think of
creatures.
Gilderoy Lockhart.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's paying
Yeah,
attention to all
but
of the
that's
classes.
not, that's not by choice per se. That's more like no one else is doing this job, and it's only going to be for a year, and he's the only idiot around. Versus
Care
Muggle
of
studies.
magical creatures. There were qualified applicants ready and willing to take over the subject. And
Okay,
we ended up with
I'm not
Hagrid.
ready to do the Hagrid.
I'm not. Yeah, the
thing.
anti-Hagrid stuff needs to be an actual episode.
We got to prepare ourselves mentally before that comes up.
It depends on how active you think Dumbledore is as an administrator. Because I don't think that he would have
does
like...
seem to be involved in teacher decisions.
yeah, kind of.
Yeah, as in he, like, hires one at the beginning of the year and then sort of, like, checks in June when the dust has settled, being like, so,
How's your scores?
should we renew that contract?
Yeah, like, there doesn't
Yeah.
seem to be, like, anyone other than Umbridge watching the teachers in their jobs to make sure they're, like, doing a good job, or, like, any sort of student evaluations or anything. So how does he know what's going on in the classroom?
I mean, to be fair, he has teachers who've been there for, like, literally decades. Like, can you imagine Dumbledore would be like, Minerva, I thought I'd check in on
Let's
your
have
class.
a
And she'd be
coaching
like,
session.
what?
You should.
year of
Because in my
class.
high school, I also had teachers who were there for 50 some odd years. And let me tell you, their teaching was not spectacular after 50 some odd years.
Well, they have
That's
tenure,
true.
so they can't get fired. Really hard to motivate people to do hard work once they know that they can't get fired.
Yeah. Like, my French teacher had no idea who was in the classroom. Like, literally, people would just walk in and out. Yeah. No, literally, so, I took French, that was 2007, and my mom had coworkers who were, like, class of, like, 55 who remembered her.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Grace, what else do you want to know? What else is exciting to you about Quirrell?
I mean, I summed it up in my notes really quickly. We don't have to go too much into it. He's listed on the Pottermore article yet again. It's apocryphal. I don't believe it technically, but it's interesting. Brilliant yet delicate boy who sought to have the world sit up and notice him. He was more concerned with like theoretical dark magic than the performance of dark magic. And when he was taken over by like a stronger evil, he believed that he could control the interaction. So like it shows that naiveness that he has. But it's just, I want to know more about him like before all of this happened and how it led up to it. Like, I guess I just love a tragedy in certain ways. I also love like picking out different places in which a character could have changed and still had a very fulfilling storyline, because I really don't consider his storyline fulfilling. But that's just a personal pet project of mine. It's like I like to pick out characters and see how their arcs could have been improved.
My question is, which Jane Austen novel is his favorite?
Oh, it's not a Jane Austen novel. He goes for Wuthering Heights hard.
Well, now I feel bad because I relate to Quirrell. I am also a Wuthering Heights boy. I have no patience for Austen.
I don't think he would either.
Well, no, according to canon, as in different as can be, he says he loves Jane Austen novels.
I'd forgotten about that. Oh my gosh. I mean, he's probably just going for Jane Eyre at that point.
I need to.
Oh wow. Okay,
God,
so
I
my
need to
reference
rewatch
went
that.
over everybody's head.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh no.
I think he'd like
man.
Persuasion.
Actually, you know what? No, I think he's secretly a huge Clueless fan. So I'm going to go with Sense and Sensibility.
No, that's
Oh,
Emma.
no, is it Emma?
No, because that came
It's
out
Emma.
after Quirrell was dead, so doesn't
What?
work.
Okay, well, he still loves Paul Rudd. He met him one time at a dark alley and just said, "Wow, you're handsome."
It's a club called
Works
the
out.
Dark Alley. That's what it really was.
I love that. That's great. I'm going to divert a little bit from any of the teachers being my favorite Plan B.
So
that's wrong,
the teacher on the podcast doesn't want to know more about any of the teachers.
No more. I'm fine. I know what their lives look like. I've lived it. I'm currently
You know this
living
too
it.
personally now.
I'm like, great. McGonagall's writing to Transfiguration magazines to correct the articles. Lupin is a starving artist boy who needs a job. Cool. Love it. Quirrell is your classic academic nerd who doesn't go anywhere else but academia. He's the anthropology major that wants to get his PhD so he can teach anthropology majors, and the circle just keeps repeating. I understand the teachers. We're fine. Give me Fred and George. Give me the problematic students. Give me the students that are a ton of fun to have in class, but ain't going to do any work. And you're like, you know what? They'll be fine. They'll be fine. They're not doing it right now, but they'll figure it out. Because boy, do I love them Weasley boys. Specifically just those two. And Bill and Charlie. Crickets for Percy.
You're killing me right now.
I know. I am. Slowly and softly.
Yeah. Grace is like telling someone to hold her earrings right now. She's ready to fight.
Listen, everyone wants to fight me. It's fine. I almost always go with Ginny for stuff like this. Just because, like, and it has the same reason of why I'm choosing Fred and George here. I would love to know more about what happens off screen with powerful characters. Because Fred and George are super brilliant. Excellent business people, very ambitious, extremely cunning. Like, they are just as Slytherin as Percy is just as Slytherin. They just have a different way of going about it. They're, talented on the Quidditch pitch. They've got this awesome mental connection between the two of them. It's what they do and what they get up to is really fascinating. And they make for such good comic relief. They make for great moments of tension with Hermione. They're excellently inserted characters. Their whole Ludo Bagman storyline, I feel like, is underrated in Goblet of Fire. And it allows Harry to have this wonderful moment of generosity and also give an outlet where Harry's not using sort of what he feels like as blood money of Cedric's into his own personal account. And so what he does is he supports another business person with it because Fred and George are there and ready and have products ready to go. I just think that these two twins are exceptional. And the same thing with Ginny, right? Like, what makes me want to know more about her is that she's super cool. Like, you could point to mini moments here and there, but she goes from little girl rescue, didn't say much, Bonnie Wright, to suddenly I've got a bat bogey hex that Fred and George are grinning about. So those sort of characters that it's like, hey, they're growing and doing these amazing things off screen. Those are the things that I now want to see, right? What is it like from Fred and George's perspective with Angelina Johnson and George and her getting romantically involved? What's it like from their perspective during the DA situation? What are their pranks that they're setting up? What's the backstory with Montague? Why did they push him into a vanishing cabinet? How do they feel?
Because he tried to take points from them.
No, I know. But, like, there's something more beyond that.
I don't know that there is. Like, one of the fun things about the Weasley twins is sometimes, like, what you see is what you get.
But that's my point, is where does that come from? Where does that inner drive come from them? Because Ron isn't doing something like that. He might try. He's not going to succeed. But Bill and Charlie wouldn't do that, and Percy certainly wouldn't do that. So where is that coming from Fred and George, right?
Yeah.
I just want to deep dive into their minds and see what experiences led them to be the people that show up in Harry's life sporadically.
It's also interesting to me that for, the next generation of pranksters, we don't really see that many pranks.
Yeah.
And you would think it would spread about the school if they would do something.
I mean, I think Harry is just so, like, focused in his own little world that, like, sort of, he wouldn't notice it unless, like, it impacted, like, the Quidditch team or his adversary Umbridge.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Like, if they're going to pull pranks, it'll probably be against Slytherin kids, so.
Also, I think that we see them at a time in their life where they're starting to take that prank energy and they're turning it into this business. That's taking a lot of their time, is like creating these products and so that other people can pull pranks and stuff like that. So I think maybe, first and second year before we knew them, that's when they're doing all of the sort of crazy pranks. And now they're sort of figuring out how to make it into their career.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think if, Philosopher's Stone was longer and more detailed, we could have potentially seen it. But like, by the time we sort of see them more as their own characters, they're already in the whole, we want to make money, we want to like be financially, stable or successful.
Yeah. I think that there are a lot of anime-worthy side stories that you could create, whether it's like Tom coming to power or whatever. But I think Fred and George's brilliance and showing how they create a business and become a flourishing business, it would be a very good one-season anime TV show.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that it would translate really well to animation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think a lot of Harry
100%.
Potter would translate really well to animation.
Because it should have been animated!
Yes.
I will die on this hill.
I mean, you saw that with the fight between Voldemort and Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix, like when they first started to really bust out on CGI stuff, that how brilliant those fight sequences and how brilliant magic can be if you have the budget. And live action is really hard to do because the CGI is so much more intense. But if you give it an animated element to it, there's a lot more that you can do on a lower budget.
Can you imagine Harry Potter animated as though it were like Spider-Verse or something?
Yeah, no, that would be incredible.
I'd melt. I'd melt. Oh my
like when
God.
Star Wars partnered with a couple of different anime things for Star Wars Visions, and it's incredible. It's an incredible product that comes out.
But yes, Fred and George in that scenario as a like animated feature would be so cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sort of. I feel like of all the many characters, like Fred and George lend themselves most easily to just a spin-off.
Indeed.
Like, be it anime, be it short stories, like, sort of whatever medium, like, I would love to know more about their shenanigans.
And then I want to know what George is like after Fred dies. Because that's one of the biggest, like, soul crushers of the series to me. Like, Dobby's death is sad. Tonks and Remus's death is very, very sad. But the one that affects me the most is Fred and George's parting.
Yeah. All right. I think we can just wrap it up here because we are nearing the 2.5 hour mark.
That flew by.
Well, when you're having fun.
Or as the spiders say, time's fun when you're having flies.
What?
I had not heard that, but that's very cute.
I've never heard that
I kind of love it.
In the first second, I was like, okay, that must be one of those English expressions I've never heard of before. And I was like, oh, okay.
No, that's one of those Sam expressions none of us have heard of.
Sitting on right there.
I guess it's a New Hampshireism because it came from somebody whose family has been in New Hampshire since like 1701. So have of that what you will.
New Hampshire might just be an entirely other world in that case.
I'm actually in the Wizarding world. This is a very popular saying at Ilvermorny.
Okay.
I'd believe it.
Well, talking about being in the Wizarding world, thank you so much for visiting us at the Three Broomsticks, Grace. It's forever and always been a blast having you. I hope you come back many, many times. Join us for a butterbeer.
All the time.
Yes, come
Grace
by for a butterbeer
teacher.
anytime.
What an incredible way to spend an afternoon. You guys really made my entire day, week, month, year. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
This was beautiful.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to plug or any social medias you want to shout out where people could follow you?
Yeah, I'll be updating this soon, but gracevictoria.net. You could find all my stuff there. I need to update it. I'm so sorry it's not updated yet. I promise it will be. I'm working on a lot of crazy things right now, and you'll see it go up there very soon. I promise. So that's gracevictoria.net.
Excellent.
And come contact me, because I love Harry Potter fans.
Before we head out, we'd like to ask for your support to get this podcast up and running. If you can afford to throw a few galleons our way, please head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. We're offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, and on-episode shoutouts to our patrons. There's a lot of administrative expenses, websites, hosting fees, and so on, involved in keeping the lights on at the Three Broomsticks. We would really appreciate your help in supporting this podcast so we can talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come. And if you like our show, don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth helps us hugely, and we always love to see these. And also, if you could rate and review us online.
You can contact us at various different social media accounts and emails. They are as followed: at 3broompod, that's spelled out THREE. 3broompod on Twitter, at 3broomsticks podcast on Instagram, at 3broomstickspod on Facebook. You can email us 3 is in the numeral, so 3broomstickspod@gmail.com, that's the number 3, and our website, 3broomstickspod.com, the 3 is spelled out. So we got some variations on that, but it will be clear once you get to know us. Links to the essays we mentioned will be there. You can submit a topic, and you can let us know your thoughts, which we very much would love and appreciate. Sophia, your turn.
Next time we meet at the Three Broomsticks, we'll be discussing a chapter from the Potter books. Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 6, The Noble and Most Ancient House of Black. And with that, I'm Sophia.
I'm Sam.
I'm Aureo.
And I'm Irvin. Thank you for listening. See you next time at the Three Broomsticks.
Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round from my friend right here of the sweet old butterbeer.
This episode of The Three Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by the Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
You can contact us at various different Twitter, Instagram, Facebook places. They are at 3, spelled out, TR... Nope. I'm going to restart that.
Not spelled out like
Which subject
exactly like
do you
that.
teach
You're
again?
Linguistics.
Yay! We're off to a great start.
10 minutes of silence follows that statement.